Hello and welcome. Today we're working on how to get started in Excel if you're a brand new beginner. So this is Excel Basics for beginners. If you open Excel, you're going to see maybe a template here. It says you have chances for different templates or a blank workbook. Here, I already have a spreadsheet opened. So if you open a spreadsheet, then you're going to end up with a columns and rows and cells, and it's very confusing at the beginning. So one thing that happens is, this is the top part, this is the ribbon, so I'm on the home ribbon. I'm in cell A1. What you see is the columns are A, B, C, and the rows are 1, 2, 3. So if I select a cell, this is cell C6. And here, below the ribbon, you have the information bar here, the formula bar. To the left of the formula bar, it says, hey, I'm in cell A3 here. I'm in cell C3. And so this is the formula bar. This shows what's in the cell. There's nothing in the cell. And this FX is for functions. We'll talk about that later. You can find a function in Excel. So let's go through our topics. So we open Excel, we have a layout, we have tabs. Tabs are these at the bottom. So this is a workbook that's made up of worksheets. So there's a worksheet or a tab called topics. And then the blank one is sheet 1, which is a worksheet or a tab. And then I've got topics here 1 through 10. And so if I need to edit this, you see I have this 1 through 5. I want to edit it. I can double click and then I can edit it. So then that becomes a meaningful label for me for that tab. So let's go back to the topics. We've opened Excel. We have a layout, the tabs, the ribbons. We have other ribbons that might be helpful, like formula ribbon or the data ribbon. Now, we have columns and rows and we have cells. So let me talk about just how to start with data. So let's do data entry and we'll talk about cells along the way and the views. Now, I've entered some information, and you want to enter information down rather than across. For example, let's say that the number of units are going to be 200 and the sales price is 20. Well, I would have to enter a tab or an arrow across. That's not going to be as fast as if I enter it down. So for example, let's say this is 250, 300. You see I can enter information a little bit faster on the way down. So let's say our apples are 200 and the sales price is 20. Let me make up some other sales numbers. And so if we look at a single cell, the cell is made up of, so let's look at pairs. In the cell, this is F4. Then in the cell is a label called pairs. For the units on apples, it's 200. For the sales price on apples, it's 20. Now, if we want to figure out what's the total sales, I need to take the 200 times 20. Now, don't do it this way. I'm going to show you two wrong ways to do it, and I'm going to show you the right way. The wrong way is somebody takes a calculator and they say 200 times 20, and they say, oh, that's 4,000, and they just type in 4,000. Now, I may have made a mistake on that. I might have typed in a wrong number. I think that's correct, but the problem is that is hard coding the number, not using a formula. So you might hear someone say, oh, you need to use a formula. You say, okay, so you know a formula starts with an equal, and you say 200 times 20. So it shows 4,000. You say, well, I used a formula. The problem with this formula is you've hard-coded the numbers in the formula. You don't want to do that. You want to use the cell reference. So if we change next month, the apples become 300 times 20, that should be 6,000, and it doesn't update because we've hard-coded the numbers in the formula. So the way you should do the formula, here's the correct way. You should take equals G3 times H3. So that number is 6,000. So in next month, if the number of apples are 250, then that number is correct with the new data. So you just want to enter the data that you need and enter formulas using cell references that you need. Now, some people then, they think, well, I've got to do this. I've got it. I've got to do it 5 more times. And you don't. You can take your cell, and you see in the bottom right-hand corner, I've got a cursor that is a outline. and if I move to the bottom right hand corner, it becomes a solid and I can drag it. And then I have formulas that update. This is called a relative formula because it went from G3 to H3 to G8, H8. This is powerful because it saves you a lot of time. Now, another way you can do the formula, copy it all the way down, is you can double click. So if you go to the bottom right hand corner and just left click twice, then it sends it all the way down. Imagine if there's 100 rows or 1,000 rows, you can do all that with a double click. That's why people use Excel. That saves you a lot of time. Okay, so we've got sales. So let's look at these cells. We have apples is in cell F3. We have units in cell G3. And we have, now look, we have a formula in I3, but it shows, publicly displays 5,000. So one of the things that people don't see at the very beginning, Word is kind of simple. What you see is what you get. But in Excel, you might not see the formula that's behind the number that it shows. So you need to be aware of that. So to know what's in that cell, you have to select that cell and you see it's G3 times, and you say, wait, what's going on? You can actually click on it as if you're editing that, and you see, oh, okay, it's taking the blue times the red to equal that 5,000. All right, so that is what's called relative address. And so it moves from G3 all the way to G8, and you can see how that works. For grapefruit, we don't want to take 250 times 20, we want to take 600 times 14. Now, let me show you how to do the other way that we might want to do this, relative versus absolute address. So let's say we have a 3% commission we're going to give to each salesperson. When they sell, we want to give them 3%. Well, 0.03 is the percentage, and I'm going to start showing formatting here. So if I hit the percent here, it formats it for 3%. And to take 3% times the 5,000. So I've got I3 times J1. Now, if I copy this down, J1 will become J2, J3, J4. We don't want that, so let me show you the error. And you'll do this at first because you won't realize, and you'll have errors. You say, well, I thought I did it right. So you get discouraged. So the only thing that's wrong with this is you want to have a way to anchor the J1. You want J1 to stay. So here's what you can do. You can make J1 $J $1, and that's the signal to say stay at J1. You can do this with a keyboard shortcut of F4. If F4 doesn't work, then you use function F4, and you see I've got dollar signs in front of J1, and so now you can copy it down. So let's check grapefruit. Is grapefruit correct? Yes, it's 8,400 times 3%. We are correct. All right, so now we've data entry, shown how that works. Moving around, sometimes you have a big cell or a big table, and so you want to move around a little bit, so you do the command or control and then the arrows. So here I'm doing command and arrow down. I can do an arrow to the right, and you're moving around. Well, on a table that's this small, it doesn't seem that that's really helpful, but on a big table with hundreds of rows or thousands of rows, this is super helpful. You don't want to drag, or just hit down arrow and wait till it gets down 1,000 rows down. All right, let's do some formatting here a little bit. You might want to, you see that there's a grid pattern that you see. If you go to the View ribbon and deselect the grid lines, you now have a blank canvas rather than the grid lines. Sometimes that's easier to read. You might want to highlight all this and put on the Home ribbon, put a grid line there, or put borders around. Down here at number 8, formatting and borders. You might want that, you might not. So if you want to undo, if you ever do something you want to undo, then Command Z or Control Z, if you're Mac or Windows, that will undo it. Now we know we want dollars, so let's make these dollars. And do we need the pennies? Let's get rid of the pennies. We can If we go to the left, it increases the pennies. If we go to the right, that decreases the pennies. And it just shows whole dollars, which is good enough for our analysis here. Now, the other thing we have is we have sometimes column widths are too wide, and you can expand them or you can narrow them by going in between the G and the H at the top, or you can double click and it'll auto size for the column width. All right, a couple more things. We've shown you how to do formulas. I want to show a function or two. If you want to add up the total sales, you say, okay, I have it. I can do equals, plus, 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 plus. Well, there's 5 or 6 of them. You don't want to do that. There is a function called sum. So there's 2 ways to start with a function. You can do equals and just start typing in sum, parentheses, and highlight all these. Close the parentheses, and that is the sum of the total sales for all those different products. This one, it tries to do something here. We'll delete that. We don't want that. So that's one way to do it. Start with an equal sign and type in. Everyone knows sum, and you can use sum. Or another way to do it is you can start with the FX, and you can search and get a formula builder and search for sum, and double click here, and it tells you, hey, I need numbers. And it's smart enough to guess what the numbers might be. You can just highlight any of those numbers, or you can highlight more than one column if you wanted to. That column, and hit enter, and there's our answer. All right, so you can do functions and formulas. Now there's a keyboard shortcut way to do this. I'm going to get rid of that. You can highlight all these and hit, do you see the summation, the sum? If I hit sum, that's going to give me the formula sum of I3 to I8. There's one more keyboard shortcut. If you're on Windows, you can just put your cursor here or select that cell. It's probably the way we should say it. If you're on Windows, it's Alt equals. I'm on a Mac, so it's Command Shift T for total. And that automatically puts in the sum function. We might want to do, let's say the commission, we want to do the sum here. We can do the keyboard shortcut, we can do the summation, or we can do the type in the formula or using the formula builder to calculate that. Now, at the very bottom, we want to put double underlines to show we're finished. And so top and double bottom border, we're finished here, and so we're in good shape.